Tip number 1, instead of using a limiter, try distorting. A limiter takes this and turns it into this, maximizing it in the waveform space available, essentially making it louder. Can you see? Literally just turning it up but keeping it at 0. It's the main part of mastering, but you can also do this with the distortion device. The difference being when you turn it up and it hits that limit, instead of just turning it down, limiting it, you distort it. As you can see here, notice the difference in the waveform there. A limiter's transparent, but a distortion device will color the sound, giving it a bit of something else, a bit of upfront edge, which suits the genres in question. Sometimes, anyway, it's worth considering. You wouldn't normally do it, but it can give it a bit of an edge. So instead of always using a limiter, try maybe using a distortion device. Ooh, and this is a sponsored video, so here are some noises. Tip number 2, despite what almost everybody does, true peak limit to around -1 dB. Almost nobody does this, but they should. I mean, I did a whole video on it. I've done multiple videos on this. I mean, mastering for Spotify. In fact, here's the proof. You can see Spotify tells you literally true peak limit to -1. And the same on Apple Music and literally every platform. They tell you specifically true peak limit to -1. So do it. Leave about 1 dB of headroom and use a true peak limiter. If you don't know what either of those things mean, time to do some researching. True peak limiting and headroom or limiting ceiling. Mastering, leaving a 1 dB ceiling, margin, normally called a ceiling. Here, ignore what the pros do. They do it wrong for the most part. It literally tells you on Spotify's website and on SoundCloud and all the Apple Music websites and stuff. It tells you true peak limit with about 1 dB of headroom. So do that. Multiplier, do some more noises from today's sponsor. Okay. Tip number 3, this will sound mad, but bear with me here. As a way to stand out in, say, hip-hop, hippity-hop, or just hip-hop, hippity-hop, or hip-hop, try adding an effect to the master. Literally a delay or a bit crusher or a crazy reverb on the master, pretty wet. So it's applying that effect to everything. It's almost nobody does this, but it's a great way of standing out. It's interesting and unique and a great way of standing out. Give it a go. Tip number 4, measure, 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 keep measuring, measure some more. You get the idea. Measure stuff. If you're unsure how to do EQ, if you're unsure how to balance the tonal balance with EQ, measure it. Take some tracks that you know sound great, that you know work, that you know are balanced, measure them with, say, tonal balance or some other referencing software, and measure your track and adjust accordingly. It's quite simple, actually. Take the guesswork out of it. Just measure what works, measure your track, and make any adjustments. In the case of EQ, and this applies to everything, including loudness. Just because one of your favorite dubstep DJs says you need to keep making your track louder, that doesn't mean it's true. In fact, if you don't believe me, measure this for yourself. Most dubstep tracks are objectively too loud, in the sense that every playback platform turns them down significantly. And again, if you don't believe me, measure the output of Spotify. Take Spotify or Apple Music or YouTube or whatever it is, record the output and look at the levels. See how the dubstep tracks are turned down. As I've said a million times, all these platforms adjust for loudness. If your track's really loud, it gets turned down. If your track's really quiet, it gets turned up. So there's a consistent loudness. And even if you're making tracks for DJs, the DJ's doing this manually even, if need be. I mean, there's auto-gain software in the digital DJ software. So for example, Tractor has auto-gain. So by default, if you load tracks in Tractor, it will automatically adjust for loudness. And even if someone doesn't do this automatically, and even if they're playing on vinyl, they're still doing it. They're adjusting for loudness with the gain controls. And so everything's adjusting for loudness. And so if you make a track louder than it needs to be, it's just going to get turned down. which isn't helpful at all. So measure loudness, see what the platform suggests, and I suppose measure what other people in your genre are doing, but you still want to be on the quiet end of that. So just because maybe most dubstep tracks are, I don't know, -6 integrated LUFS, that doesn't mean yours should be 2. In fact, it's just going to get turned down. Measure, measure, measure. Just measure these things. Take the guesswork out of it. But I suppose in the case of loudness, if in doubt, aim for around -10 or -11, depending on the genre. More noises from the sponsor. They're excellent. Finally, tip number 5, there's an argument to be made that it's almost a part of the art to do things wrong. And so you could argue in some of these genres to ignore what I just said, even though technically what I just said was correct. Maybe it's a part of the art, it's a part of that screw you vibe. That screw you ears, screw you audio fidelity, but I'm going to do it my way and destroy my track, but that's a part of what I'm trying to do creatively and artistically. Maybe that's a part of it. Anyway, in lots of these tracks, if you have good headphones, you can hear mistakes. You can hear how they've pushed a limiter too far for no benefit. I mean, once you've flattened out the sound, pushing it harder doesn't flatten it out anymore. Once it's flattened. But if you push that limiter harder, it starts to fall apart. In a way you can't really hear with, say, laptop speakers or cheap headphones or maybe an untrained ear or at the club. But on good headphones, you can hear these imperfections. Whilst technically that's a mistake, maybe it's a part of the art. Maybe it's a part of that screw you, I'm just going to slam it vibe. And maybe that's a part of the energy, a part of what makes that genre what it is. Maybe. But I suppose my point here is do it intentionally. If you're going to slam your track, make it too loud, or not leave enough headroom, or not true peak limit, do it intentionally. Do it because that's a part of what you're doing, not just because you didn't get around to it. For example, if you make a track too loud, it's just going to get turned down. It is. I mean, there's no getting around it. Your track could be looking like this if it was the correct loudness, but instead it's looking like this because it's too loud. It's too loud, so the platform or the DJ even manually is just going to turn it down, so it's lower quality, lower fidelity. But as I say, if you like that, cool. With a smaller waveform, it'll be less punchy, it'll be more one-dimensional. It won't have as much energy. It's just, I mean, it makes common sense, right? If your waveform's only this big, it can do less than if the waveform's this big. Less of everything, less energy, less emotion, less excitement, less punchy, less everything. So objectively, scientifically, unarguably, worse if the waveform is smaller. So don't make a track too loud, unless that's a part of what you're trying to do intentionally, as a part of a screw you everyone, I'm doing it my way vibe, which I can respect. I can respect that. Artistically, creatively, I can respect that. Ooh, and there's a discount code. So if you want 15% off, use the code multiplier15. Multiplier15 for 50% off any of the packs in the description below, which I think are excellent. Great for said genres in the title of the video. And you get 15% off, so that's excellent. We should do that. Multiplier15. I shall catch you guys on the flippity flip.